Welcome to my channel. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe and like. Captain Jack Hawk Sullivan was no stranger to danger, but this time, it felt different, like an unseen warning from the cosmos itself. The crimson glow of the dwarf star Kepler 442 bathed his polished black combat armor, casting cold, jagged reflections. Beside him, Kaelith, the Voryn ambassador, moved with an effortless grace that was almost magnetic. Her shimmering blue skin gleamed faintly, her silver hair flowing like liquid metal, and her violet eyes sparkled with unshakable confidence. "You're too tense, Captain," she said, her voice clear as a bell. "This planet's been abandoned since the Alliance pulled out. Nothing but dust and old machinery." Jack quirked a half-smile, brushing back his dark brown hair, his sharp eyes scanning the ruins of the mining complex ahead, twisted metal towers jutting up like the bones of some ancient beast. "With respect, Ambassador, abandoned is just the universe's way of saying not discovered yet." Kaelith let out a soft laugh, light as a breeze. "Is that what they teach at Earth's Marine Academy? To see danger in every grain of sand?" Jack shrugged, his smile softening the hard edges of his demeanor. "Something like that. Along with how to survive when everything goes to hell." Her eyes lingered on him, a spark of curiosity flickering in their violet depths. "You're good at that, aren't you, Captain?" He caught the playful edge in her tone but kept his professionalism intact. His mission was to protect Kaelith during her inspection of the old mining site on Kepler 442c, not to chase the sparks flaring between them. Still, her allure, her alien beauty and razor-sharp intellect, was impossible to ignore. They approached the mine's entrance, a massive metal gate warped like the jagged maw of a dead monster. "Reports say the mining equipment is intact," Kaelith said, her fingers gliding over a glowing handheld device. "The Alliance wants to know if it's worth reactivating." Jack nodded, but his combat instincts were screaming. Something was off. He raised a hand. "Let me go first, Ambassador." Kaelith sighed, her tone tinged with mock drama. "If you insist, Captain. But I assure you, we're perfectly safe." Jack stepped into the mine, darkness swallowing them whole. His enhanced eyes adjusted quickly, revealing massive machines dangling from the ceiling like the carcasses of metallic beasts. Dust hung in the faint beams of light piercing through cracks above. Kaelith moved forward, confident as if strolling through a diplomatic chamber. "Just relics," she said. Her words were cut off by a sharp scraping sound, like claws on metal. Jack drew his pistol, shoving Kaelith behind a machine. "Down!" he barked as blazing green plasma bolts tore through the darkness from multiple directions. They were surrounded. Skarath's shadows darted through the gloom, their eyes glowing like embers. "Impossible," Kaelith whispered, her voice trembling. "They signed a peace treaty." Jack activated his energy shield, a shimmering blue barrier that shuddered with each hit. "Stay behind me," he ordered, his voice cold as steel. "I move, you follow." "Got it?" She nodded, her earlier confidence shattered. Jack counted 6 attackers, too many for a head-on fight. The escape route was a side gate to the west, but the narrow corridor made it a perfect ambush point. "Get ready," he said, calculating fast. 3, 2. A barrage of plasma erupted, forcing him to spin and shield Kaelith. The barrier flared, but it was built for one. A bolt slipped through, searing his shoulder. Pain burned like fire, but he gritted his teeth, returning fire and dropping one Skarath. "Captain?" Kaelith cried, her voice laced with panic. "Just a scratch," he lied, sweat streaming down his face. "Run!" he commanded, leading the charge toward the side gate. Kaelith stayed close, plasma screaming behind them. Each step sent agony ripping through his shoulder, but he didn't stop, his focus locked on getting her to safety. Near the gate, a Skarath lunged, its energy blade blazing. Jack shoved Kaelith back, raising his shield. The blade struck, screeching as the system overloaded. He kicked the attacker's chest, but another plasma bolt hit his leg, tearing through armor and dropping him to one knee. Kaelith screamed, but instead of fleeing, she grabbed a fallen Skarath's pistol, firing with startling precision. One enemy fell, black blood pooling on the floor. She hauled Jack up, her hands trembling but strong. "Don't make me do this alone, Jack," she said, her voice steady despite the fear. They burst outside, the red light of Kepler 442c glaring down like a bloody blade. Jack stumbled, blood soaking his armor, dripping onto the crimson sand. Kaelith caught him, her soft hands firm, as if defying the universe to take him. "Don't give up now, Jack," she said, her voice shaking but resolute. He radioed for evac, his voice hoarse. "Shuttle's here in 3 minutes. Hold on." They ducked behind a boulder, tension hanging thick in the silence. When the shuttle's engines roared, Jack checked his wounds. The plasma had torn his armor, leaving deep burns on his shoulder and a gash in his leg. Kaelith knelt beside him, her violet eyes wide with worry, her fingers brushing the edge of his wound. "Why did you do that?" she asked, her voice low, almost a whisper. "You could have saved yourself." Jack forced a weak grin, defiance in his eyes despite the pain. "Protecting you is my job." She shook her head, her silver hair catching the starlight like a river of light. "Your job doesn't require dying." The shuttle landed, kicking up clouds of dust that veiled Kepler 442c's red glow. Kaelith helped Jack stand, and though he could walk, he didn't pull away. Amid the pain and danger, an invisible bond formed, not yet love, but a deep connection forged in fire and trust. The ambush was perfectly calculated, as if the darkness itself had been plotting in silence. Skarath figures glided among the towering machines, swift as specters, their eyes burning like coals in the black. "Impossible," Kaelith whispered, her voice quaking, her usual confidence gone. "The Skarath signed a peace treaty. They'd never." A salvo of blazing green plasma cut her off, tearing through the air in deadly arcs. Jack activated his personal energy shield, a faint blue wall encircling them, shuddering with each impact. "Stay behind me," he ordered, his voice calm but sharp as a blade. "I move, you follow." "Understood?" Kaelith nodded, her violet eyes now filled with fear, her hands clutching her handheld device like a lifeline to reality. Jack counted quickly, 8 attackers, maybe more, lurking in the shadows. Too many for a direct fight, especially while protecting Kaelith. The only escape was the eastern side gate, at the end of a long, narrow corridor ripe for an ambush. But there was no other way. "Get ready," he said, his eyes tracking the darting shapes. 3, 2. A heavier barrage of plasma erupted, forcing him to pivot and shield Kaelith. The barrier flared, but it was meant for one. A bolt slipped through, searing his left shoulder. Pain exploded like fire, spreading through his body, but he clenched his jaw, firing back with his right hand. Once Skarath fell, its groan fading into the dark. "Captain?" Kaelith cried, her voice breaking with panic. "Just a scratch," he lied, sweat pouring down his face, his vision starting to blur. "Run!" he barked, charging toward the side gate. Kaelith stayed close, plasma howling behind them like hunting beasts. Each step was agony, blood seeping through his armor, but Jack didn't falter, his will of iron fixed on getting her to safety. The corridor narrowed, ancient machines on either side like prison walls, blocking any other escape. As the faint light of the side gate appeared, a Skarath lunged from a corner, its energy blade flaring like green fire. Jack reacted instantly, shoving Kaelith back and raising his shield. The blade struck, screeching as the shield overloaded, its blue light flickering in warning. Jack drove his boot into the attacker's chest, sending it sprawling, but another plasma bolt hit his leg, ripping through armor and dropping him to one knee. Kaelith screamed, but instead of running, she grabbed a fallen Skarath's plasma pistol, firing with uncanny precision. An enemy collapsed, black blood pooling. She pulled Jack up, her hands shaking but strong. "Don't leave me to do this alone, Jack," she said, her voice resolute despite trembling. They burst outside, Kepler 442c's red light glaring down like a cold, sharp blade. Jack stumbled, blood soaking his armor, dripping onto the red sand. Kaelith caught him, her soft hands fierce, as if fighting the universe to keep him upright. "Don't give up now, Jack," she said, her voice trembling but carrying newfound resolve. He radioed for evac, his voice rough, each word dragged from his chest. "Shuttle's here in 3 minutes. Hold on." They took cover behind a massive boulder, their ragged breaths mingling with the desert's whistling wind. Silence fell, broken only by their pounding hearts and the fading sound of plasma fire. When the shuttle's engines roared, Jack finally glanced at his wounds. The plasma had shredded his armor, leaving deep burns on his shoulder and a long gash in his leg, blood flowing freely. Kaelith knelt beside him, her violet eyes brimming with worry, her fingers gently brushing the wound's edge, as if willing him to stay. "Why did you do that?" she asked, her voice low, almost a whisper. "You could have saved yourself." Jack forced a weak grin, defiance in his eyes despite the gnawing pain. "Protecting you is my job." She shook her head, her silver hair shimmering under the stars like a river of light. "Your job doesn't mean sacrificing your life." He looked at her, his gaze bright despite the pain tearing at him. "Maybe not. But humans live for something bigger than that." His words struck a deep chord in Kaelith, touching a part of her the Voryn's restrained, logical culture had never reached. The shuttle landed, kicking up blinding dust that shrouded Kepler 442c's red glow. Kaelith helped Jack stand, and though he could walk, he didn't pull away. Each step was a challenge, but he gritted his teeth, holding firm. As they boarded, medics rushed forward, the cold white light of the medical bay swallowing them. Kaelith stayed close, ignoring protocol, her eyes never leaving Jack as the military medic, a wiry man named Ramirez, began treating his wounds. "How bad is it?" she asked, her voice sharp but unable to hide her worry. Ramirez glanced up, surprised by her presence. "Plasma caused deep tissue damage, slight toxin traces. We need Orion Station's equipment, 20 minutes out." Kaelith didn't hesitate. "Pilot, head to Orion Station now." The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ambassador, protocol requires we return to Alliance headquarters first." Kaelith stood tall, her voice cold as steel. "Override Protocol Delta 9, Ambassadorial Authority. This man saved my life. I won't let him die for red tape." Silence gripped the shuttle, broken only by the hum of machinery and Jack's labored breathing. Then the pilot responded, "Yes, ma'am. Course set for Orion Station." Jack watched her, his eyes bright despite the screaming pain. "Didn't expect you to throw orders like that," he said, his voice weak but teasing. Kaelith took his hand, a bold move for a Voryn. "There's a lot you don't know about me, Jack." He squeezed her hand lightly, feeling the warmth of her blue skin. "I'm starting to want to find out." For the next 20 minutes, Kaelith didn't leave his side, her eyes glued to the medical monitor, tracking each beat of his heart. She wondered why she felt so strongly for a human she'd only just met. For Voryns, emotions were a luxury, suppressed by logic. But Jack's reckless act of saving her had awakened something in her she didn't know existed. As the shuttle touched down at Orion Station, medics were ready. Jack was rushed to the ER, and Kaelith, though stopped, stood outside, her gaze fixed on the door, as if her will alone could keep him alive. The medical bay of the rescue shuttle was bathed in harsh white light, as if trying to banish all shadows but only highlighting the fragility of life. Military medic Ramirez, a lean man with deft hands, worked with terrifying efficiency, cutting away the scorched armor around Jack's wounds. Charred metal fragments clattered to the floor, sharp and dry. Kaelith stood close, far beyond the bounds of Voryn diplomatic protocol, her violet eyes locked on Jack. "How bad is it?" she asked, her voice sharp but unable to mask the worry tightening her chest. Ramirez looked up, his brow furrowing at her unusual presence. "Plasma caused deep tissue damage, with mild toxin traces. No bone involvement, but we need specialized equipment at Orion Station, 20 minutes out." Kaelith didn't hesitate. "Pilot, reroute to Orion Station immediately," she ordered, her voice low and firm. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom, hesitant. Ambassador, protocol requires we return to Alliance headquarters first. Kaelith stood straighter, her violet eyes flashing like blades. Override Protocol Delta 9, Ambassadorial Authority. This man saved my life. I won't let him die for bureaucracy. Silence enveloped the shuttle, only the hum of machinery and Jack's heavy breathing audible. Then the pilot replied, "Yes, ma'am." Course set for Orion Station. Jack lay on the medical table, his eyes bright despite the pain gnawing at his flesh. He forced a weak grin, still carrying his defiant edge. "Didn't expect you to throw orders like that, Ambassador." Kaelith took his hand, a bold, almost taboo gesture for a Voryn, known for emotional restraint. Her fingers trembled slightly, but the warmth of her blue skin reached him, like an unspoken vow. "There's a lot you don't know about me, Jack," she said, her voice low, almost a whisper. He squeezed her hand gently, feeling a fragile but powerful connection. "I'm starting to want to find out," he replied, his voice hoarse but his gaze fierce. For the next 20 minutes Kaelith stayed by his side, her eyes fixed on the medical monitor, where Jack's heart rate danced a perilous waltz. She wondered why she reacted so strongly to a human she'd only known for hours. For Voryns, emotions were a luxury, buried under logic and duty. But Jack's reckless dive into danger to save her had stirred something in her she didn't know existed, a part willing to defy every rule. She shook her head, trying to dismiss the thoughts, but her gaze stayed on him, as if watching him could anchor him to reality. The shuttle landed at Orion Station, its engines roaring as they shook the medical bay. Medics were waiting, rushing a stretcher in with urgent precision. Jack was wheeled into the ER, the metal doors slamming shut behind him. Kaelith moved to follow, but a Voryn doctor, a woman with a stern gaze, blocked her. "Ambassador, you're not allowed inside," she said, her voice cold. Kaelith froze, her hands clenching, but she didn't argue. She stood there, her violet eyes locked on the door, as if her will could pierce the metal and keep Jack alive. While waiting, Kaelith pulled out her handheld device, her fingers swiping quickly to distract from the helplessness. A notification blinked, a coded message from an unknown source, sent just before the ambush. She frowned, opening the file, her heart racing as data appeared. It wasn't the mining equipment report she'd been told about, but a dossier on a secret energy core, hidden by the Alliance in the mine for decades. The data suggested the core wasn't just a power source but something far more dangerous, capable of obliterating a planet if mishandled. She flinched, her breath catching. The Skarath attack wasn't random, they knew about the core, and the Alliance didn't want her to find out. Kaelith stowed the device, her eyes scanning Orion Station's quiet corridors. She decided to keep this secret, at least until Jack recovered. But a question haunted her, a shadow creeping into her mind. Was Jack truly just caught in this conspiracy by chance? Or did he know something he wasn't telling? His reckless act in the mine, shielding her, defying danger, was it a soldier's instinct, or part of a larger plan? She shook her head, trying to banish the doubt, but it clung to her, like Kepler 442c's red dust. She stepped to the waiting area's large window, gazing into the endless void where stars glittered like untold secrets. Orion Station, a metal fortress floating in the nothingness, was the safest place in the sector, but now she felt like she stood on a precipice. If the energy core was real, and if the Alliance was willing to kill to hide it, she and Jack had stumbled into a game far deadlier than the ambush. She clenched her fists, nails digging into her blue palms. The Voryn in her wanted to analyze, plan, control. But the human part Jack had awakened, the part ready to risk everything for another, was urging her to act, no matter the cost. A beep from her handheld device broke her thoughts. A new message, short but chilling. "Ambassador Kaelith, report to Alliance headquarters immediately. No delays." She switched it off, her eyes returning to the ER door. The Alliance could wait. Jack had risked his life for her, and now, she wouldn't leave him, not yet. But deep within, a bad feeling stirred, that the secret of the energy core was only the beginning, and what lay ahead would test not just their trust, but their very essence. 3 days passed, and Kaelith barely left the waiting area of Orion Station, her body taut as a bowstring, her violet eyes fixed on the ER door. She ignored every call from the Alliance, claiming she needed to report on the attack in person, but the truth was she couldn't leave while Jack lay there, teetering between life and death. When the doctor finally allowed visitors, she entered the room, her heart pounding faster than usual. Jack sat on the hospital bed, tissue regeneration patches having mended most of his wounds, but he was still pale, fresh scars etched deep on his shoulder and leg. His familiar grin spread when he saw her, still defiant though weaker. "Ambassador Kaelith, breaking every protocol for a grunt like me," he teased, his voice rough but his eyes blazing. Kaelith felt her cheeks warm, her blue skin faintly flushed, a rare, almost alien reaction for a Voryn. She stepped closer, trying to maintain her composure. "How do you feel?" she asked, her voice soft but unable to hide her concern. Jack shrugged, the motion making him wince slightly. "Like a freighter ran me over," he said, but his mischievous grin didn't fade. "Docs say I'll be walking soon. Thanks to you, Kaelith. I wouldn't have made it without you." His words were simple, but their sincerity caught her off guard, leaving her flustered. She sat on the edge of the bed, hands resting on her knees, fingers tightening to mask her unease. "I just did what was logical," she said, her voice low. "You got hurt because of me." Jack tilted his head, his eyes glinting as if reading her thoughts. "Just logic, huh?" he asked, his tone teasing but with a hint of challenge. Before she could respond, her wrist communicator buzzed, an urgent Alliance priority signal cutting through like a warning. Kaelith shut it off with a swift, decisive motion, her eyes still locked on Jack. "They want me to report," she said, her voice low, almost a whisper. "But I'm still here." Jack's soft laugh lit up the sterile room. "You're making me think I'm special, Ambassador." Kaelith smiled, a rare expression, as if letting a human part of herself slip through her Voryn logic. "Maybe you are," she replied, her voice soft but bold. They began to talk, uninterrupted by danger or duty for the first time. Jack shared stories of Earth, of humans rushing into fire to save strangers, of nights singing under star-filled skies, of finding joy in the darkest moments. Kaelith listened, her violet eyes wide, as if glimpsing an alien world. She spoke of Voryn culture, where every decision was cold analysis, where emotions were weaknesses locked behind walls of logic. "We don't understand actions like yours," she said, her voice pensive. "Risking your life for another, to a Voryn, it's incomprehensible." Jack shrugged, his grin softening his rugged edge. "Maybe that's why we're human. We don't just live to survive. We live for each other." His words struck deep, shaking the logical walls Kaelith had built her life around. She looked at him, her gaze softening, but then the secret of the energy core, discovered on the rescue shuttle, rose in her mind, a shadow she couldn't ignore. She couldn't hold it back any longer. "Jack," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "I found a message before the attack. About an energy core the Alliance hid in the mine. Do you know anything about it?" Jack stiffened, his eyes flickering with caution, like a curtain falling. "I'm just a Marine, Kaelith," he said, his voice calm but strained. "My job's to protect you, not dig into Alliance secrets." But his hesitation, the way he avoided her gaze, sparked out. Kaelith clenched her fists, nails digging into her blue palms. "Jack, I need the truth," she said, her voice sharper but controlled. "If this core is real, and if the Skarath attacked because of it, we're being hunted. What do you know?" Jack sighed, his eyes finally meeting hers, but they were complex, as if weighing truth against lies. "I don't know much," he said, his voice low. "But I've heard rumors in the ranks. About a secret Alliance project, something with enough power to reshape the galaxy. I thought it was just talk until the Skarath hit us." He paused, studying her. "Where'd you find that message?" Kaelith shook her head, not ready to reveal everything. "An unknown source," she replied, her voice colder than intended. "But it's enough to know the Alliance is hiding something big." The air between them grew heavy, their fragile bond from the mind now tested by suspicion. Kaelith wanted to trust Jack, to believe the man who shielded her with his body wasn't part of a conspiracy. But her Voryn instincts, always analyzing, always doubting, wouldn't let her ignore his hesitation. Jack seemed to sense it. He reached out, placing his hand on hers, his warmth startling her. "Kaelith," he said, his voice earnest. "I don't know the whole truth, but I swear, I'm not working for anyone but my mission. And that mission is keeping you safe." She searched his eyes for deceit but found only resolve, tinged with mystery. Before she could respond, a sharp, urgent knock sounded at the door. An Alliance officer, a Voryn with cold eyes, stepped in. "Ambassador Kaelith," he said, his voice devoid of warmth. "The Alliance demands your immediate report. No exceptions." Kaelith stood, her gaze still on Jack. "I'll report when I'm ready," she replied, her voice like steel. The officer's brow furrowed, but he didn't argue, leaving a heavy silence in his wake. Kaelith looked at Jack, her heart torn between trust and doubt. "We're not done," she said, her voice low. Jack nodded, his smile fading. "I know." As she left, her communicator buzzed again, a new message. "Don't trust anyone, Ambassador. Not even your savior." She froze, her breath catching. The secret was growing, and she knew this half-truth was only the start of a larger storm. The next day, when Jack was cleared to leave the hospital, he walked slowly, his wounds making each step a small challenge. Kaelith stayed by his side, her violet eyes shimmering with concern but laced with the wariness from their prior talk. They strolled through Orion Station's artificial garden, where trees from dozens of planets intertwined, their metallic leaves and glowing flowers shimmering under simulated light. The air was cool, a stark contrast to Kepler 442c's red dust, but Kaelith sensed an invisible tension, as if even the garden hid secrets. Jack paused by a sparkling fountain, light dancing on the light armor he still wore, now patched and clean. "The Alliance won't like you dodging them," he said, his voice low but teasing, trying to lighten the mood. Kaelith shrugged, a gesture she'd unconsciously picked up from him, her eyes tracing the fountain's splashing droplets. "They can wait," she replied, her voice soft but firm. "I'm learning something more important." Jack tilted his head, his gaze sincere, almost tender, a rarity for the hardened soldier. "And what's that?" She took a deep breath, her heart beating unusually fast, as if standing at an unseen threshold. "That sometimes, risking yourself for others isn't weakness," she said, her voice low, each word carefully chosen. "It's strength." Jack's eyes lit up, and he took her hand, their fingers interlocking, his warmth seeping through her blue skin. "Welcome to the human way, Kaelith," he said, his faint smile carrying a deep connection. In that moment, amid the fountain's murmur and shimmering light, the universe seemed to pause. But the peace didn't last. A squad of Alliance soldiers appeared at the garden's entrance, their boots clanging on the metal floor, plasma rifles raised, their green glow casting cold shadows on the trees. Their leader, a Voryn officer named Theric, stepped forward, his darker blue skin stark against his narrow, icy eyes. "Ambassador Kaelith, Captain Sullivan," he said, his voice sharp as a blade. "You're under arrest for treason against the Alliance." Kaelith froze, her hand still in Jack's, her body rigid with shock. "Treason?" she repeated, her voice trembling with anger and confusion. "On what grounds?" Theric's lips curled in a humorless smirk. "We have evidence Captain Sullivan contacted the Skarath, leaking details about the energy core to provoke the attack." He held up a handheld device, its screen displaying coded data, audio logs, and messages Kaelith couldn't read from a distance. She turned to Jack, her eyes wide with panic, her heart constricting. "Jack, tell them it's not true!" she nearly shouted, her voice breaking, desperate for him to deny it, to shatter this nightmare. But Jack only looked at her, his eyes complex, as if wrestling between truth and lies. He squeezed her hand but didn't immediately refute the charge. "I'm no traitor, Kaelith," he said, his voice low and steady, his gaze unwavering. "But I knew about the core. And I'm not the only one. His words cut like a knife, slicing through the fragile trust they built. Kaelith pulled her hand free, stepping back, her violet eyes shimmering with hurt and suspicion. You knew? She whispered, her voice trembling. And you didn't tell me? Theric cut in, his voice cold. Enough. You're both to be escorted to headquarters for interrogation. He signaled, and the soldiers advanced, energy cuffs glowing in their hands. Jack raised a hand to stop Kaelith as she moved to confront them. Don't, Kaelith, he said, his voice low but urgent. Let them take us. I'll explain. But she shook her head, her eyes blazing with anger. Explain? She snapped, her voice sharp as a blade. You hid this from me, Jack. The man who saved my life. I don't even know who you are. The soldiers marched them through the garden, the fountain's light now cold, mirroring the rift between them. Kaelith walked with her head high, but her heart was heavy. She remembered the mine, Jack shielding her, his blood soaking the red sand. Was that a soldier's instinct, or part of a larger scheme to draw her into a game? The coded message about the core haunted her, along with the question she tried to bury. Was Jack truly the man she thought he was? In the corridor to the detention ship, Jack walked behind her, his eyes fixed on her back, as if wanting to speak but held back. Kaelith felt his gaze but didn't turn. The Voryn suspicion ingrained in her clashed with the human part Jack had awakened, the part that wanted to believe in goodness, in sacrifice. As they were shoved into a cell, the metal door slamming shut, Kaelith faced him, her eyes still burning. Tell me, Jack, she demanded, her voice cold but trembling. The truth. All of it. Or I swear I'll never trust you again. Jack sighed, leaning against the cold metal wall, his eyes no longer hiding. I'm not with the Skarath, he said, his voice low. But I heard about the core from a military source. They said it's not just energy, it's a weapon, Kaelith. The Alliance tested it, and the Skarath paid the price. I didn't tell you because I wasn't sure what you'd do with it. You're an Alliance ambassador. His words hit like a blow, making Kaelith step back, her breath catching. You thought I'd betray you? She asked, her voice breaking. Jack shook his head, his eyes pained. No. I was afraid you'd choose the Alliance over the truth. Before she could reply, an explosion rocked the ship, red emergency lights flashing. Shouts and plasma fire echoed from the corridor. Kaelith and Jack exchanged a look. Despite the doubt, they knew they had to rely on each other to survive. The cell door flew open, and a Skarath loomed, its eyes glowing like embers. Come with me, it growled, its voice like grinding stone. Or die. Kaelith gripped Jack's hand, her heart pounding. This twist didn't just shatter her trust, it thrust them into a deadlier game, where truth was not just an answer, but the only path to survival. Jack and Kaelith were marched onto the Alliance detention ship, the cold metal corridors echoing with the heavy tread of soldiers' boots. In the cramped cell, dim green light from the ceiling lamp cast shadows on Kaelith's tense face. She sat across from Jack, her violet eyes burning with anger and hurt. Jack leaned against the wall, his gaze fixed on her, as if wanting to speak but restrained by the heavy air. Finally, he spoke, his voice a whisper to avoid the guards outside. I'm not with the Skarath, Kaelith, he said, his eyes earnest but cautious. But I've been in contact with a rebel group within the Alliance. They believe the core isn't a resource, it's a weapon. The Alliance tested it on the Skarath, and that's why they rebelled. Kaelith shook her head, her silver hair glinting under the dim light. Why didn't you tell me? She asked, her voice sharp but trembling, as if holding back rage. You left me in the dark, Jack. I trusted you. Jack sighed, his eyes pained. Because I wasn't sure I could trust you, he said, his voice low. You're an Alliance ambassador, Kaelith. If I told the wrong person, the rebels would be wiped out. His words cut deep, making her clench her fists, nails digging into her blue palms. So what am I to you? She asked, her voice nearly a whisper. A mission? A pawn in your game? Before Jack could answer, an explosion shook the ship, metal screeching as if torn apart. Red emergency lights flashed, shouts and plasma fire echoing from the corridor. Kaelith sprang up, her eyes wide with panic, but Jack was already moving. He knelt, pulling a small device from his armor, working to unlock the cell door. "No time to argue," he said, his voice cold and sharp. "Want to live? Follow me." The door sprang open, black smoke pouring in, obscuring the corridor. Jack grabbed Kaelith's hand, pulling her through the thick haze, the sounds of gunfire and Skarath roars echoing around them. They raced through the corridor, Jack firing at pursuing Alliance soldiers, each plasma shot precise, his soldiers' instincts honed. Kaelith, though furious, didn't stand idle. She grabbed a plasma pistol from a fallen soldier, firing with the startling accuracy she'd shown in the mine, now a vital weapon. A Skarath appeared ahead, its energy blade flaring, but Kaelith shot first, dropping it instantly. Jack glanced at her, his eyes flashing with surprise and pride. "Not bad, Ambassador," he said, his voice teasing despite his ragged breath. She didn't reply, gripping the pistol tighter, her eyes blazing with resolve. "To the escape pods!" Jack shouted, leading her through a side corridor, smoke and fire roaring behind them. Alliance soldiers closed in, but a group of Skaraths suddenly appeared, attacking the soldiers from behind, giving them a chance. Kaelith realized this wasn't random. The Alliance rebels Jack mentioned were working with the Skarath. They reached the escape pod bay, Jack slamming the doors shut and activating the launch system. The ship shuddered as the pod ejected, hurtling into space before crash landing on a barren planet nearby, its cracked, ash-gray surface stretching endlessly. In the darkness of a cold cave, Kaelith and Jack took shelter, their ragged breaths mingling with the howling wind outside. Kaelith faced him, her violet eyes burning. "I trusted you, Jack," she said, her voice trembling with anger and hurt. "I put my life in your hands, but now I don't know who you are." Jack looked at her, his eyes pained, her words a fresh wound. "I'm the man who shielded you with my body," he said, his voice low but firm. "That's the only truth that matters, Kaelith. I'd never betray you." She shook her head, stepping back, her heart torn. "Truth?" she snapped. "You hid the core, the rebels. Your truth is only half of it." Jack opened his mouth to speak, but a flash from Kaelith's handheld device cut him off. A new message, short and chilling, from Tharek, the Voryn officer who arrested them. "Ambassador, you're not as innocent as you think. Check your personnel file. You're the reason the core was activated." Kaelith froze, her breath catching, as if the ground had collapsed beneath her. She swiped through her device, accessing her encrypted Alliance personnel file. Data appeared, revealing a horrifying truth. Years ago, as a research assistant, she had unwittingly approved a mining project on Kepler 442c. That project was a cover for testing the energy core, a weapon that devastated the Skarath. Her memory of it had been erased, an Alliance trick to keep her compliant. "I didn't know," she whispered, tears rolling down her blue cheeks, the device's light illuminating her pale face. Jack stepped closer, placing a hand on her shoulder, his voice low but steady. "They used you, Kaelith. But now you know the truth. You can make it right." She looked up, her eyes a mix of pain and resolve. "Make it right?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I caused the deaths of thousands of Skarath without knowing. How do I fix that?" Jack squeezed her shoulder, his gaze unwavering. "By stopping the Alliance from using the core again. With me, Kaelith." Before she could respond, a sound echoed from the cave's entrance, heavy footsteps and a low Skarath growl. Jack drew his pistol, pushing Kaelith behind him. "Get ready," he whispered, his eyes cold and sharp. But when the Skarath appeared, it didn't attack. "The rebels sent me," it said, its voice like grinding stone. "Follow me if you want to live." Kaelith looked at Jack, her heart pounding. Despite the truth about her past, despite the cracks in their trust, she knew they had no other choice. She nodded, taking Jack's hand, ready to face the storm ahead, where truth was not just an answer, but their only weapon. In the frigid cave, The faint glow from Kaelith's handheld device illuminated the jagged rock walls, as if trying to expose the secrets buried within. Her fingers swiped rapidly through her personnel file, her heart pounding as each line of data revealed a horrifying truth. Years ago, as a young research assistant, she had unwittingly approved a mining project on Kepler 442c. Disguised as resource extraction, it was a cover for testing the energy core, a weapon of mass destruction that obliterated thousands of Skarath lives. Her memory of the project had been erased, a sophisticated alliance ploy to keep her compliant, a pawn unaware of the game. "I didn't know," Kaelith whispered, tears streaming down her blue cheeks, glinting in the dim light. Her voice broke, as if the truth had shattered the logical walls she'd built her entire life. Jack knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder, his warmth cutting through her icy skin. "They used you, Kaelith," he said, his voice low but steady. "But now you know the truth. You have a chance to make it right." She looked up, her violet eyes a mix of pain and resolve. "Make it right?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I helped kill a people. How do I fix that?" Jack squeezed her shoulder, his gaze unwavering. "By stopping the Alliance from using that core again. With me, Kaelith." She nodded, though her heart remained heavy. They resolved to find the rebels, who were risking everything to destroy the core before the Alliance could reactivate it. But their journey across the barren planet was far from easy. The sky was a lifeless gray, the cracked ground choked with dust, and Skarath, friend or foe indistinguishable, lurked in the shadows. Jack and Kaelith left the cave, moving cautiously through razor-sharp rock formations, each step echoing like a defiance of death. Kaelith gripped her plasma pistol, her unexpected combat skills now second nature. Jack led, his sharp eyes scanning every corner, but his old wounds slowed him, each movement a silent battle against pain. Hours later, they walked into an ambush. Skarath surged from the darkness, their ember-like eyes blazing, energy weapons glowing in their hands. Jack shoved Kaelith behind a boulder, activating his energy shield, but it flickered, weakened from prior battles. "Stay there!" he shouted, firing with lethal precision, dropping 2 attackers. But they were outnumbered, and a plasma bolt pierced the shield, searing his chest. Jack collapsed, blood soaking his armor, his breath ragged. Kaelith screamed, rushing to shield him, firing relentlessly, felling another Skarath before dragging him into a narrow crevice. "Jack, hold on!" she commanded, her voice shaking but resolute, pressing her hands against his wound. Hot blood seeped through her fingers, but she didn't stop, tearing a strip from her clothing to bandage him. Jack forced a weak grin. "You learn fast, Ambassador," he whispered, his voice faint. She shook her head, her eyes blazing with determination. "I'm not letting you die. Not today!" But the Skarath's roars grew closer. Kaelith knew they couldn't run, Jack was too weak, and she couldn't fend off an army alone. A massive Skarath appeared, taller than the rest, its energy blade blazing like green fire. He was their leader, his red eyes locked on her. Kaelith stood, pistol in hand, but instead of firing, she raised a hand in a gesture of peace, her voice trembling but clear. "We're not your enemies," she said, using the Skarath language she'd studied in diplomatic training. "The Alliance deceived us, as they did you. I know about the energy core. I want to stop it." The Skarath leader tilted his head, his gaze probing, as if weighing whether to kill her or listen. "Humans lie," he growled, his voice like grinding stone. "You brought death to our lands." Kaelith took a deep breath, her eyes never leaving his. "I was deceived," she said, her voice steady. "I approved that project without knowing the truth. But now I stand here, not to fight you, but to make it right." She gestured to Jack, barely conscious behind her. "He risked his life to save me, so I could stand here and speak to you. If you want vengeance, kill me. But if you want justice, let us help." The air was taut, a single wrong move away from bloodshed. The Skarath leader stepped forward, his blade inches from her throat, its green glow reflecting on her blue skin. But then he lowered it, his eyes still cold. "You will come with me," he said. The rebels wait. But if you lie, death will not be swift. Kaelith nodded, her heart racing, but she hid her fear. She turned, helping Jack to his feet, though he could barely stand. What did you just do? He whispered, his eyes hazy with pain. Bought us time, she replied, her voice low. And maybe an ally. They followed the Skarath leader through the gray desert, the wind carrying dust and the scent of burned metal. Jack leaned on Kaelith, each step a struggle, but his eyes burned with a will stronger than his failing body. Kaelith felt the rift between them healing, bit by bit, through these moments of survival. She knew the Skarath were slow to trust, and the rebels might be even more dangerous. But the truth, painful as it was, had brought them here, and she was determined to wield it against whatever lay ahead. As the faint glow of the rebel base appeared in the darkness, Kaelith gripped Jack's hand, her violet eyes shining with resolve. They had survived the cave, the ambush, and the devastating truth about her past. But she knew this base wasn't the end, it was the start of a greater battle, where trust, truth, and their very lives would be pushed to the limit. The rebel base lay deep within the barren planet, a labyrinth of rusted metal tunnels lit by faint green glows. The air was thick with the scent of machine oil and gunpowder, the hum of machinery blending with the hoarse voices of rebels preparing for an inevitable battle. Led by the Skarath leader, Jack and Kaelith entered the command center, where a group of rebels analyzed data on the energy core. A human rebel, a woman with singed short hair, pointed at a large screen, her eyes cold and sharp. This core isn't just a weapon, she said, her voice firm. It's a power source that could fuel the galaxy, or wipe it out, depending on who controls it. Kaelith stared at the data, her heart racing as she grasped the scale of what they faced. If the Alliance reclaims it, she whispered, they won't stop at Kepler 442c. Jack, still weak from his wounds, stood tall, his eyes blazing with determination. Then we destroy it, he said, his voice low but unwavering. Before the Alliance gets here. The Skarath leader growled softly, his red eyes studying Jack. Human, are you ready to die for this? Jack smirked, his defiant grin unbroken. I've survived worse. Let's find out. Kaelith looked at him, her heart torn between fear and admiration. He wasn't just fighting for survival, he was fighting for something greater, as humans always did. But time was against them. A rebel burst in, voice frantic. Alliance fleet! They've entered orbit! The radar screen lit up, dozens of massive warships filling the sky, their engine lights like deadly stars. The Alliance wasn't here to negotiate, they were here to annihilate. The rebel leader barked orders, and the base erupted in organized chaos. Plasma rifles were loaded, energy shields activated, and Skarath roared, ready for vengeance. Jack volunteered to lead a suicide squad to the core's vault. If we destroy it, he told Kaelith, the Alliance has no reason to stay. She grabbed his hand, her violet eyes fierce. I'm not letting you go alone, she said, her voice resolute. But Jack shook his head, his gaze soft but firm. You have a bigger job, Kaelith. Use your ambassador status, contact the Federation. Expose the Alliance. If we fail, only the Federation can stop them. She wanted to argue, but his eyes silenced her. She nodded, her heart heavy, and squeezed his hand one last time before he led his team away. Kaelith raced to the communications room, her fingers flying over the console, sending an encrypted message to the Federation. This is Ambassador Kaelith of the Voryn, she said, her voice sharp but trembling. The Alliance tested a genocidal weapon on Kepler 442c, devastating the Skarath. I have proof. Intervene now, or the galaxy will pay. She attached the data from her device, every detail about the core, the Alliance's crimes. As the signal went out, she slumped against the wall, breathless, clinging to the slim hope that the Federation would act in time. Meanwhile, Jack and his squad infiltrated the core's vault, a vast chamber with glowing blue metal walls. The energy core, a white orb of light suspended in an energy cage, pulsed with near supernatural power. But Alliance soldiers were waiting, and a brutal firefight erupted. Jack fired, leading his team through a hail of plasma, but a nearby explosion threw him back, blood seeping through his armor. He gritted his teeth, crawling to the control panel, setting the core to self-destruct. "Everyone, get out!" he shouted, but a plasma bolt tore through his shoulder, dropping him. In the command center, Kaelith watched via a monitor, her heart stopping as Jack fell. She screamed, starting to run, but a rebel held her back. "You can't help him from here," she said. Suddenly, a voice crackled over the comms. Theric, the Voryn officer who had arrested them. "Ambassador, I received your message," he said, his voice cold but clear. "I'm a Federation agent, embedded in the Alliance. I'm disabling their fleet from within." Kaelith froze, this twist a beacon in the dark. Theric, whom she'd thought an enemy, was an ally. With Theric's help, the Alliance fleet descended into chaos, warships losing control as their systems were hacked. In the vault, Jack, bleeding heavily, activated the self-destruct. A deafening explosion shook the base, blinding white light engulfing the room. The core disintegrated, its energy dissipating harmlessly into space. Rebels cheered, but Kaelith's eyes were glued to the screen, her heart constricting as she saw no sign of Jack. Under pressure from the Federation and the Rebels' counterattack, the Alliance retreated, leaving the planet in ruins. Kaelith raced to the vault, ignoring smoke and debris, searching for Jack. She found him among charred metal, motionless, blood pooling beneath him. "Jack!" she cried, kneeling beside him, her trembling hands touching his pale face. He opened his eyes, weak but flashing his defiant grin. "Told you! I've survived worse," he whispered. Rebel medics rushed Jack to the infirmary, Kaelith never leaving his side. In the cold white light, she held his hand, as she had on the rescue shuttle, her violet eyes shimmering with hope and fear. The doctors said his wounds were severe, but he'd live, his will, as humans so often showed, defying all limits. Kaelith squeezed his hand, tears falling, this time from relief. "You're an idiot, Jack," she whispered, her voice trembling. He chuckled weakly, his eyes bright. "Worth it though, right?" As the base stabilized, Kaelith received a message from the Federation. They were investigating the Alliance, and the Core's crimes would be exposed. She looked at Jack, the man who had pulled her from the darkness of Voryn logic, and realized that, though this battle was over, their journey, and something deeper between them, was just beginning. 6 months later, a Federation research vessel glided through the vastness of space, stars twinkling like unfulfilled promises. Jack and Kaelith stood by the command deck's large window, gazing at the scarred frontier planet below, a world bearing the wounds of the Alliance's cruel experiments. The ship's air carried hints of metal and herbs from the medical bay, where they just delivered supplies to rebuilding communities. Jack, a new scar running along his shoulder, stood tall, his sharp eyes softening as they rested on Kaelith. She was recounting an ancient Voryn song she'd relearned, its melody gentle yet powerful, echoing generations that had overcome darkness. Her voice was clear, like the wind chimes of Kepler 442c, but now brimming with emotion she no longer hid. "See," Jack said, pulling her into his arms, his warmth enveloping her in the ship's cold expanse. "Sometimes, risking everything is the only way to find the light." Kaelith leaned into him, her blue skin shimmering under the console's glow, her violet eyes sparkling like the stars outside. "And sometimes," she replied, her voice soft but certain, "that light is worth every moment." Her smile was rare but radiant, as if she'd found a piece of herself in the blood and fire journey they'd shared. Their bond had grown from the ashes of fractured trust, transcending the cultural divide between human and Voryn. To Jack, Kaelith was no longer the cold ambassador of a logical race. She was the woman who faced the Skarath leader, held his hand in the infirmary, and chose to trust him even when truth threatened to tear them apart. To Kaelith, Jack embodied the human spirit she once couldn't fathom, reckless, sacrificial, yet always finding hope in darkness. They were more than allies, two halves of a whole, forged in war and truth. The ship hummed as it shifted orbit, heading to the next planet in their mission. After exposing the Alliance's crimes, the Federation tasked them with aiding communities affected by the core and similar projects. Jack, bearing the scars of their final battle, resumed his role as a leader, organizing relief teams with a soldier's decisiveness. Kaelith, with her ambassadorial authority and vast knowledge, bridged species, ensuring the Alliance's mistakes would never recur. They worked as one, each complementing the other's flaws, like pieces of a perfect puzzle. In a quiet moment, Kaelith looked up, her eyes locking with Jack's. "Did you ever think we'd be here?" she asked, her voice low, almost a whisper. "After everything, the mine, the rebels, the core, after I thought you were a traitor?" Jack chuckled, his roguish grin the same one that flustered her on Kepler 442c. "Honestly, I was just trying to survive the day," he said, his eyes twinkling. "But meeting you, Kaelith, that was worth the risk." Her smile came easier now, and she rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart. But they both knew their fight wasn't over. The Alliance, though weakened, still schemed in the shadows, and secrets like the core might not be the last. The Federation, while fairer, was rife with political intrigues Kaelith had to navigate. And the Skarath, reluctant allies, harbored deep mistrust of humans and Voryns. Each planet they visited was a new challenge, each community a reminder of truth's cost. As the ship passed a vibrant nebula, its blue and purple light flooding the command deck, Kaelith took Jack's hand, their fingers intertwining. "What's next?" she asked, her voice tinged with curiosity and concern. Jack squeezed her hand, his eyes shining like the stars beyond. "Anything," he said, his voice certain. "As long as we're together." She nodded, her violet eyes gleaming with faith, not just in him, but in herself, in the path they'd chosen. They stood there, in the infinite expanse, two beings from different worlds who had learned from each other what no book or protocol could teach, to live not just for survival, but for a future worth building. Jack's human spirit, unyielding, sacrificial, hopeful, had merged with Kaelith's intellect and resolve, leaving an indelible mark on the history of both their peoples. As the ship sailed on, carrying new light to the galaxy's darkest corners, Jack and Kaelith knew that, whatever shadows awaited, they would always find a way to illuminate them, together.